The dusty wind carried the scent of sage and sorrow through Paradise, Arizona territory, on that scorching June afternoon in 1878, when Hannah Brighton stood before the general store counter and realized she had lost everything except the dress on her back and the two children waiting for her in their leaking cabin 3 miles west of town. She had buried Samuel 3 months ago, laid him in the hard ground after a snake bite turned his leg black, and took him from her in 4 agonizing days. The ranch they had built together was falling apart without his strong hands to mend the fences, patch the roof, and keep the livestock from wandering. Her sewing money barely covered flour and beans, and now she needed needles. The last good needle had snapped that morning while she was finishing a quilt for Mrs. Henderson, who had already paid half an expected delivery by Friday. "I need pins and needles," Hannah said quietly to Mr. Patterson, the store owner, hating the tremor in her voice. She was 24 years old, mother to James, who was 6, and little Sarah, who was 4, and she refused to beg. But the coins in her palm amounted to enough for either sewing supplies or dinner, not both. Mr. Patterson, a portly man with spectacles that constantly slid down his nose, glanced at her hand and his expression softened. "Mrs. Brighton, I can put this on credit if you need." "No." The word came out sharper than she intended. Samuel had despised debt, and she would not dishonor his memory by owing money she could not guarantee to repay. "Thank you, but no. I will take the pins and needles." She counted out the coins carefully, aware of the other customers in the store, aware of how her black mourning dress had faded to gray at the seams, aware that her boots needed resoling, and her bonnet was 2 seasons out of style. Not that fashion mattered much in Paradise. What mattered was survival, and right now survival meant needles to finish that quilt. As she turned to leave, supplies wrapped in brown paper, she collided with a solid chest that smelled of leather and horses. Strong hands steadied her shoulders, preventing her from stumbling backward. "Pardon me, madam," a deep voice rumbled. Hannah looked up into the face of a man she had seen around town but never spoken to. Zachary Abbott, if she remembered correctly. He was somewhere in his late 20s, tall and lean with sun-darkened skin and eyes the color of whiskey. A cowboy, she had heard, who worked various ranches and took odd jobs around Paradise when ranch work was scarce. He wore dusty denim, a faded blue shirt, and a leather vest, and his hat was pushed back just enough to show dark hair that needed cutting. "My fault," she managed, stepping back from his grip, though his hands had already fallen away the moment she was steady. "You dropped something." He bent to retrieve her package, which had tumbled from her arms. When he straightened, he held it out to her with a slight incline of his head. "Hope nothing broke. Just sewing supplies, thank you." She took the package, acutely conscious of his scrutiny, of the way his eyes noted the worn fabric of her dress and the thinness of her wrists. "You are Mrs. Brighton, right? I knew your husband a bit. Played cards with him a few times at the saloon. Samuel was a good man. I was sorry to hear about his passing." The unexpected kindness in his tone made her throat tighten. "Thank you. That is kind of you to say." She moved to leave, but his voice stopped her. "I do not mean to intrude on your grief, madam, but I heard you talking to Patterson. If you need work done around your place, I have some free time coming up. I am fair with a hammer and saw, and I do not charge much." Pride warred with desperation. The barn door was hanging by one hinge. The chicken coop needed reinforcing before a coyote got in. The roof leaked in 3 places, but hiring help cost money she did not have. "I appreciate the offer, Mr. Abbott, but I cannot afford to hire anyone right now." He studied her for a moment, his expression thoughtful. "I was not thinking of money exactly. I noticed you are a seamstress. My shirts are all coming apart at the seams and I have a coat that needs patching. Maybe we could work out a trade. I fix what needs fixing at your place, you mend my clothes. Seems fair to me." It was charity dressed up as commerce, and they both knew it. The mending he described would take her perhaps 2 evenings. The work her property needed would take him weeks. But as she looked into his steady gaze, she saw no pity there, only a straightforward offer made man to woman, equal to equal. "That would be acceptable," she said slowly, "if you are certain. Would not have offered if I was not certain." He touched the brim of his hat. "I will ride out tomorrow morning if that suits you. Can start on that barn door I heard banging in the wind last time I passed your way. Tomorrow would be fine. Thank you, Mr. Abbott. Zachary, or Zach if you prefer. No need for formality if we are going to be working together. Then you may call me Hannah." She saw something flicker in his eyes, an acknowledgement of the small intimacy of given names before he nodded. "Hannah, I will see you tomorrow morning then." The walk back to her cabin took nearly an hour, following the rutted wagon road that wound through scrub brush and rocky outcroppings. The sun beat down mercilessly, and by the time she reached home, her dress was stuck to her back with sweat. James and Sarah burst from the cabin the moment they heard her approach, their faces bright with the resilient joy of children who had not yet learned that the world could be cruel. Mama, I caught a lizard." James held up his prize, a small brown creature that regarded her with resigned tolerance. "That is wonderful, sweetheart. Let him go now before he gets too hot in your hand." Sarah wrapped her arms around Hannah's legs, her blonde curls tangled from play. "I am hungry, Mama." "I know, baby. Let me get inside and I will make us some dinner." The cabin felt like an oven after hours of baking in the sun. Hannah opened the shutters to let in what breeze existed and set about making a simple meal of beans and cornbread. While it cooked, she unwrapped the pins and needles, feeling the weight of relief that she could finish Mrs. Henderson's quilt. Tomorrow she would deliver it and collect the remaining payment, which would buy food for another week, maybe 2 if she was careful. As her children ate, chattering about their day, she found her thoughts drifting to Zachary Abbott. She knew so little about him beyond the basic facts. He was a drifter, though one with a solid reputation for honest work. He drank but did not get drunk, gambled but did not lose his wages, and kept to himself mostly. He had come to Paradise 2 years ago from somewhere in Texas, though she had never heard the specific story. Men like him were common in the territory, cowboys who followed work from ranch to ranch, never settling, never putting down roots. Why he had offered to help her, she could not fully understand. Perhaps he really did need mending done. Perhaps Samuel's brief friendship had meant more than a few card games. Perhaps he simply was the kind of man who helped widows, though she had not seen evidence of particular gallantry before now. That night, after she put the children to bed and worked on the quilt by lamplight, she realized she had not felt quite so alone since Samuel's death. The prospect of having another adult to talk to, even just in passing while he worked, lightened something in her chest. Then she felt guilty for the lightness, for any emotion that seemed like moving on when Samuel deserved her grief. She worked until her eyes grew heavy, then banked the fire and climbed into the narrow bed that still felt too large without her husband's solid warmth beside her. Sleep came slowly, and when it came, she dreamed of broken fences being mended and roofs that did not leak, and of steady brown eyes that looked at her without pity. Zachary arrived shortly after dawn, riding a good bay gelding and leading a pack mule loaded with tools. Hannah had been up for hours already, having finished the quilt in the pale pre-sunrise light and made breakfast for her children. She had also changed into her better work dress, a simple calico in faded blue, and pinned her dark hair more carefully than usual. She told herself it was simple courtesy, dressing decently for a guest, though a small voice whispered that she wanted to look less like the desperate widow he had encountered yesterday. "Morning," he called out as he dismounted. James and Sarah had been playing in the dirt near the porch, but at his arrival they went shy, pressing against Hannah's skirts. "Good morning, Zachary. These are my children, James and Sarah. Pleased to meet you both." He crouched down to their level, his posture open and unthreatening. "That is a fine stick you have there, James. You planning to use it for fishing or fort building?" The question was so specific and interested that James forgot to be shy. "Fort building. I am making a fort behind the house." "A fort is important work. Every home should have proper defenses." He said it with perfect seriousness, and James beamed. "Would you like coffee before you start?" Hannah asked. "I just made a fresh pot. Coffee would be welcome, thank you." She poured him a cup from the pot on the stove, conscious of his size in her small cabin. He stood in the doorway, not presuming to enter fully without invitation, and accepted the tin cup with a nod of thanks. "I figured I would start with that barn door," he said after taking a long drink. "Then move to the chicken coop if I have time today. The roof is going to take longer, but I want to get to it before the summer storms start in earnest." "You do not have to do all that. Really, it is too much in trade for mending. A deal is a deal. Besides, Samuel once warned me off a bad horse I was thinking of buying. Saved me a broken leg at minimum, maybe my neck. I figure I owe him, and since I cannot pay him back, helping his family seems right." He finished the coffee and handed back the cup. "I will work out of your way. If you need anything, just holler." He worked through the morning with steady efficiency, and Hannah found herself glancing out the window more often than necessary as she sat at her sewing. He had stripped off his vest in the heat and worked in his shirt sleeves, and she could see the play of muscles in his back and shoulders as he lifted, hammered, adjusted. There was something mesmerizing about watching a competent person at work, seeing problems solved through skill and effort. Around midday, she brought him water and a plate of cornbread. He had the barn door rehung and was examining the chicken coop, making notes in the dust with a stick. "This whole side needs rebuilding," he said, accepting the water gratefully. "Whoever built it originally did not brace it right. One good push from a determined predator and it would collapse. Samuel built it." She said it without rancor. Her husband had been a dreamer and a hard worker, but carpentry had not been among his strengths. He did better with the barn. That is solid work there. It was a kind thing to say, finding something to praise, and she appreciated it. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, the only sounds the wind in the scrub brush and the distant cry of a hawk. "Can I ask you something?" she said suddenly. "Sure. Why are you really doing this? And please do not say it is about the mending. We both know that is not equal trade." He looked at her directly, his eyes serious. "Couple reasons, I guess. Samuel was decent to me when a lot of folks were not. I am half Comanche on my mother's side, and some people have strong feelings about that. Samuel never cared, just treated me like anyone else. That is rare enough to be worth remembering." She had not known about his heritage, though now that he mentioned it, she could see it in the sharp planes of his face, the particular darkness of his eyes. It explained some of the reserve she had always sensed around him in town, the way he stood slightly apart. "What is the other reason?" she asked quietly. "Honest truth. You looked like you needed help, and I have always had trouble walking past someone who needs help when I can give it. Got me in trouble more than once, but I never did learn to ignore it." He paused. "And maybe I am tired of drifting. Maybe I am looking for something to anchor to, even if it is just for a few weeks. Makes me feel less like tumbleweed." The raw honesty in his words stirred something in her chest. I understand feeling like tumbleweed. I have been feeling like that since Samuel died, like any strong wind could blow me away. Then maybe we are helping each other. You get your place fixed up, I get to feel useful and settled for a bit. Fair trade after all." She smiled, a real smile that felt strange on her face after months of grief. Fair trade. Over the following days, Zachary became a constant presence on the property. He arrived each morning just after dawn and worked until late afternoon when the heat became too oppressive. True to her word, Hannah spent her evenings mending his clothes, and she discovered he had not exaggerated their condition. His shirts were held together more by hope than thread, and his coat had tears that suggested encounters with barbed wire and thorny brush. As she repaired each garment, she found herself learning about him through the evidence of his life. A carefully patched bullet hole in one shirt, high on the shoulder. Burns on another from campfire sparks. Worn cuffs that spoke of long hours in the saddle. She mended each item with more care than strictly necessary, her stitches small and even, reinforcing seams that would hold for years if treated right. They fell into an easy rhythm. She would bring him water and simple meals throughout the day, and he would take brief breaks to eat and talk. He was good with her children, never impatient with their questions, often showing them what he was doing and explaining how things worked. James followed him around like a shadow whenever Hannah allowed it, and even shy Sarah began bringing him treasures she found: interesting rocks, bird feathers, a perfectly intact snakeskin that made Hannah shudder, but that Zachary admired with appropriate solemnity. "You are good with them," Hannah observed one afternoon, watching him show James how to properly hammer a nail. "I like children. They see things clear, you know. No pretense, no hidden meanings. A thing is or it is not." He guided James's small hand, helping him drive the nail home. "There you go. Good strong swing. Did you have brothers and sisters growing up?" "3 sisters, 2 brothers. I was the middle child, which meant I learned early how to take care of the younger ones and how to dodge the older ones' fists." He said it lightly, but she sensed complicated history behind the words. "You see them?" His expression shuddered slightly. "Not for a long time. We scattered after my mother died. My father was white, a cavalry soldier, and he did not stick around once she was gone. Said he had done his duty by her and that was enough. The local mission was willing to take us in, but they wanted to separate us, and we all figured we were better off taking our chances on our own. I was 14, old enough to work, too young to be much good at it, but I learned." 14. The same age her Samuel had been when he left home to make his way west. The same age countless other boys became men too fast, forced by circumstance into adult responsibilities. It made her heart ache. "I am sorry. That must have been difficult." "Life is difficult," he said simply. "But it is also good when you find the good parts. Your boy here, he is a good part. Your daughter too, you should be proud." "I am." She touched James's hair gently. "They are the reason I get up in the morning." Their eyes met over her son's head, and something passed between them, an understanding of the weight of responsibility, the burden and gift of caring for someone beyond yourself. Then James tugged on Zachary's sleeve, eager to hammer another nail, and the moment passed. 2 weeks into his work on the property, a summer storm rolled in with dramatic suddenness. Hannah saw the clouds building in the afternoon, great dark thunderheads that turned the sky purple-black. She called the children inside and began securing shutters, worried about Zachary on the roof where he had been working. But he was already climbing down, moving with careful speed as the first fat raindrops began to fall. He reached the ground just as the sky opened up, releasing a deluge that turned the dusty yard to mud within seconds. He ran for the porch, and Hannah opened the door wide. "Get inside, quickly," He ducked through the doorway, dripping wet despite his sprint from the barn. Thunder cracked overhead and Sarah shrieked in startled fear. Hannah scooped her up, making soothing sounds while James pressed against her side. "It is all right, babies, just noise. We are safe inside." Zachary stood awkwardly by the door, water pooling around his boots. "I should go." "I do not want to impose. Do not be ridiculous. You will catch your death going out in this." Another crack of thunder emphasized her point, and lightning flashed bright enough to illuminate the dim cabin. "At least wait until it passes." He hesitated, then nodded. "I will wait on the porch." "You will not. You are already inside and already wet. Come away from the door." She set Sarah down and grabbed a towel from her washing pile. "Here, you are dripping." He accepted it with murmured thanks and did his best to dry off, though his shirt was soaked through and his hair dripped into his eyes. Hannah found herself noticing things she had tried not to notice before: the breadth of his shoulders, the line of his jaw, the way his wet shirt clung to his chest. She looked away quickly, busying herself with stoking the fire to take the chill off the sudden temperature drop. The storm raged outside, wind howling around the cabin walls. Hannah lit lamps against the premature darkness and set about making coffee and heating up leftover stew. It was strange having a man in her home again, strange and familiar at once. The space felt smaller, warmer, less empty than it had in months. "Tell us a story," James demanded of Zachary with the boldness of a child who had decided someone was safe. "James, do not be rude. Mr. Abbott is not here to entertain you." "I do not mind." Zachary settled carefully into Samuel's old chair, and Hannah felt a pang at seeing someone else in that spot, followed by guilt that it was not an entirely unpleasant pang. "What kind of story do you want? Cowboys and Indians?" James bounced excitedly. "James," Hannah said warningly, "remember your manners." But Zachary was smiling. "How about I tell you a story my mother told me, about the time the Comanche people stole the sun from the sky and had to give it back because Earth got too cold for the buffalo." He spun a tale of trickster coyotes and brave warriors, of the balance between day and night, of learning when to hold on and when to let go. His voice was low and melodic, and even Sarah crept closer to listen, her fear of the storm forgotten. Hannah found herself listening just as raptly as her children, struck by the poetry of the story and the glimpses it gave her into a world she knew almost nothing about. When he finished, James immediately begged for another, but Hannah intervened. "That is enough for now. The storm is passing. Let Mr. Abbott finish his coffee in peace." Indeed, the thunder had retreated to distant rumbles, and the rain had gentled to a steady patter. But the sun was setting, what little could be seen of it through the clouds, and the light was fading fast. "You should stay for supper," Hannah heard herself say. "It is late, and you worked through lunch today." "I do not want to impose." "You keep saying that. If I thought you were imposing, I would not have invited you." She ladled stew into bowls with hands that were almost steady. "Besides, you have eaten my cooking for 2 weeks now. It is not as if it is anything special. It is good cooking, better than I have had in a long while." They ate together around her small table, the children chattering between bites, and Hannah felt something settle in her chest that had been unsettled for months. This was what family meals should feel like, she thought. Warm and comfortable, full of simple conversation and easy silences. Samuel had often been too tired from ranch work to talk much at dinner, would eat and then fall asleep in his chair, before rousing himself to go to bed. She had not minded, had understood the exhaustion of physical labor, but she had sometimes missed this engagement, presence, the sense of being truly together rather than merely in the same room. After dinner, Zachary helped her clear the dishes, despite her protests. They worked side by side at her wash basin, and his sleeve brushed hers, sending an unexpected spark of awareness through her arm. She nearly dropped the plate she was washing. "Sorry," he said, shifting to give her more room. "No, it is fine. I am just clumsy tonight." She scrubbed the plate more vigorously than necessary, her cheeks warm. When the dishes were done and the children ready for bed, Zachary finally took his leave. The rain had stopped, leaving the air cool and sweet-smelling, and stars were emerging between the breaking clouds. "Thank you for the meal," he said from the porch. "And the shelter. Thank you for the company. It has been a while since we had anyone to talk to besides each other." She wrapped her arms around herself, feeling the night chill now that she was outside the cabin's warmth. "Will you be back tomorrow, if you still want me to be? The roof is about half done. I want you to be." The words came out softer, more intimate than she intended, and she saw his expression shift in the lamplight spilling from the doorway. "Then I will be here." He mounted his horse and rode into the darkness, and Hannah stood on the porch long after he disappeared, listening to the drip of water from the eaves and the song of evening crickets, feeling something very much like hope stirring beneath her ribs. The next day brought clarity in more ways than one. The storm had washed the dust from the air, leaving the sky brilliant blue and the desert colors vibrant. It had also washed away some of Hannah's carefully maintained reserve. As she watched Zachary work, as she brought him water and food, as they talked about small things and large ones, she found herself acknowledging what had been growing between them for days now: attraction, interest, the first tentative threads of something deeper. It terrified her. Samuel had been dead for less than 4 months. 4 months was not long enough to mourn, not nearly long enough to even think about another man. What would people say? What would Samuel say if he could? But she was lonely. So desperately lonely. In a way that went beyond missing Samuel specifically and into missing human connection, adult conversation, the comfort of being cared for instead of always being the one who cared. And Zachary was kind and patient and good with her children, and when he looked at her, she felt seen in a way she had not felt in a long time. She was standing at the window, lost in these thoughts, when James came running inside. "Mama, Mama, there are men coming," her heart lurched. Strange men approaching usually meant nothing good. She grabbed her father's old shotgun from above the door and stepped onto the porch. James pressed behind her skirts. 3 riders were approaching at an easy lope. As they drew closer, she recognized them as ranch hands from the Benson spread, the largest cattle operation in the area. Zachary had already climbed down from the roof and stood in the yard, his posture casual but alert, his hand resting near the gun on his hip that Hannah had not even realized he wore. The riders pulled up in a swirl of dust. The lead man, a thick-set fellow with a red face and aggressive eyes, looked past Zachary to Hannah. "Mrs. Brighton, we heard you had a half-breed working around here. Mr. Benson sent us to give you some neighborly advice about that." Hannah's fingers tightened on the shotgun. "I do not recall asking for Mr. Benson's advice on who I hire. Some animals look tame, madam, but they are still wild underneath. Indians cannot be trusted. Mr. Benson would not want to see you come to harm, you being a defenseless widow and all." "I am not defenseless," she said coldly. "And the only people who have ever harmed me or mine have been white men, so you can tell Mr. Benson to keep his advice to himself." Zachary spoke quietly. "I will go, Hannah. It is not worth trouble." "You will not go. You have work to finish and you are not doing anything wrong." She raised the shotgun slightly, not quite pointing it but making clear she could. "These men are leaving." The red-faced man's expression darkened. "You are making a mistake, lady. The mistake would be you still being on my property in the next 30 seconds. I may be a widow, but I can shoot straight and my neighbors know it, the ones who matter anyway. For a tense moment, it could have gone either way. Then one of the other riders, a younger man who looked distinctly uncomfortable, spoke up. "Come on, Garrett." Mr. Benson said to warn her not to start trouble. "We did what we came to do." Garrett glared at Hannah, then at Zachary. "You will regret this." "I doubt that," Hannah said evenly. They rode off, and she did not lower the shotgun until they were out of sight. Then the adrenaline hit her and her hands started shaking. Zachary was beside her instantly, gently taking the gun before she could drop it. "You are all right. They are gone." His voice was steady, grounding. "They had no right to come here and say those things. They have the right of prejudice and numbers. It is the way things are." He sounded tired, like this was an old story he had heard too many times. "I should go, Hannah. I do not want to bring you trouble." "No." She grabbed his arm, feeling the solid warmth of him through his sleeve. "I meant what I said. You are not doing anything wrong. If Benson has a problem, that is his problem, not ours. His problems can become your problems real fast. He is a powerful man. And I am a stubborn woman. Please, Zachary, do not let them chase you off. I need your help. And besides, I refuse to let bullies win." He looked at her for a long moment, something complicated moving behind his eyes. "You could lose business over this. People might not want to hire a seamstress who associates with Indians. Then they were not people I wanted to work for anyway." She squared her shoulders. "I will not send you away for doing nothing but helping me. That would make me just like them, and I am not." "You are sure?" "I am sure." He nodded slowly. "Then I will stay. But if things get difficult, then we will handle it together." The word hung in the air between them, full of implications neither was quite ready to examine. Finally, he smiled, a real smile that transformed his usually serious face. "All right then, together." The rest of the day passed without incident. But Hannah felt the shift between them. The way standing up for him had moved them from employer and employee to something more like partners. He worked with renewed focus, and when she brought him water in the afternoon, their hands touched on the tin cup and neither pulled away immediately. That evening, after he left and the children were asleep, she sat on the porch and looked at the stars, thinking about choices and consequences. She was a widow with 2 small children in a harsh land. She needed to be practical, needed to think about survival and reputation and what was proper. Caring for a man who was half Comanche, who had nothing but his skills and his horse, who drifted from place to place, that was not practical. But when had her heart ever listened to practical advice? The following days brought more visitors, though none as hostile as Benson's ranch hands. Mrs. Henderson came to collect her finished quilt and brought with her 2 more commissions, which Hannah accepted gratefully. The older woman looked around the property, noting the repaired barn and chicken coop, the work in progress on the roof. "I see you found some help," she said, her tone neutral. "Yes. Zachary Abbott has been doing some repairs in trade for mending." "Abbott? That is the cowboy who is part Indian, right?" Hannah's spine stiffened. "He is a skilled worker who has been nothing but respectful and helpful." Mrs. Henderson raised her eyebrows at Hannah's defensive tone, then smiled slightly. "I am not criticizing, dear. I have known Zachary for a while now. He fixed my porch last year and did good work. I just wanted to make sure you were being careful. A young widow has to protect her reputation." "I am being careful, but I am also not going to turn away honest help because some people have ugly prejudices. Good for you. We need more people willing to stand up to the Bensons of the world." She patted Hannah's arm. "Samuel would be proud of you. He always did admire your backbone." After Mrs. Henderson left, Hannah felt lighter. At least she had one ally in town, one person who would not spread gossip or judgment. It was more than nothing. Zachary finished the roof 3 days later, and the next rain, a brief afternoon shower, proved the quality of his work. Not a single leak. Hannah stood in the cabin with her children, listening to the rain drum overhead, feeling safe and dry for the first time since the previous spring. "The roof is done," she said that evening, standing with Zachary by the corral where she kept her 2 remaining cows and her old mare. "And the barn and chicken coop. You have done everything I could have asked for and more. There are still some smaller things I could tackle. The porch step is loose, and your well cover needs replacing. Zachary," she turned to face him fully, "you have already done far more than any mending justifies. I cannot keep accepting your help without fair payment." "What if I do not want payment?" The words were quiet, serious. "What if I want to keep coming here?" Her heart thumped hard. "Why would you want that? I think you know why." He took off his hat, turning it in his hands, a gesture she had learned meant he was gathering his thoughts. "I have been drifting for near 15 years, Hannah. Drifting and telling myself I liked it, like being free and unattached. But the truth is, I was lonely. I just did not want to admit it because lonely meant wanting something I figured I could not have. A home, a family, someone to come back to at the end of the day. Zachary, let me finish, please." He drew a breath. "These last few weeks, being here, helping you, spending time with your children, talking to you, it has been the best time I have had in longer than I can remember. You make me want to stop drifting. You make me want to put down roots, plant something and watch it grow. And I know it has not been long since Samuel passed. I know you are still grieving. I am not asking you to stop grieving or to forget him. But I am asking if maybe, when you are ready, you might let me keep coming around. Not as hired help, but as someone who cares about you. Someone who wants to be here." The words she had been holding back for days, maybe weeks, rose to her lips. "I care about you too. I know I should not so soon, but I do. You have been kind to me and my children. You make me feel less alone, and I think Samuel would approve. He always said life was for the living, that we should not waste our days on regret. Then let me court you properly. I know I do not have much to offer, no land, no money to speak of, but I am a hard worker and I would be good to you and your children. I would never hurt you or them, I swear that." She reached out and took his hand, feeling the calluses and strength there, the tangible evidence of everything he had been saying. "You have more to offer than you think, and yes, you can court me." His fingers closed around hers, warm and careful, and the smile that spread across his face was like sunrise. "Thank you. I promise you will not regret it." "I know I will not." They stood there as the sun set, hands joined, the beginning of something fragile and precious taking root between them. The courting that followed was unlike anything Hannah had experienced before. Samuel had courted her in the traditional way, with chaperoned visits and formal parlor conversations. Zachary's courtship was different, shaped by necessity and circumstance. He came to the property every day, sometimes finding work to do, sometimes simply spending time with her and the children. They talked while she sewed and he whittled, conversation flowing easy and deep. He told her about his childhood, about his mother's people and their ways, about the loss that had shaped him. She told him about her marriage, about Samuel's dreams for the ranch, and how his death had shattered everything she thought her life would be. "Did you love him?" Zachary asked one evening. They were sitting on the porch while the children played in the yard, the last light turning everything gold. "I did. Not the wild, passionate love from story books, but something steadier, comfortable. We were partners, working toward the same goals. When he died, I lost my partner, and that is what I grieved most. The loneliness of trying to do everything alone. Do you feel guilty for what is happening between us?" She considered the question honestly. "Sometimes. But then I remember that Samuel would not want me to be alone and struggling." He was practical. He would tell me to find help, to accept it when it came. And you came. That feels like something I should not ignore. He reached over and took her hand, a gesture that had become familiar and dear over the past weeks. I am glad I came. So am I. The town, inevitably, began to talk. Hannah heard the whispers when she went to the general store, saw the looks when she attended Sunday service. Some were sympathetic, some judgmental, some openly hostile. Mrs. Patterson pulled her aside after church one Sunday and suggested, with saccharine sweetness, that perhaps she should be more mindful of appearances. "People are saying that the Indian is living on your property," Mrs. Patterson said, her eyes avid with malicious curiosity. "Zachary has his own place in town," Hannah replied calmly. "He visits during the day, often when I am finishing sewing commissions. Everything is entirely proper. Still, a young widow should be more careful. Think of your children." "I am thinking of my children. I am thinking that they need food and shelter and someone to fix the roof over their heads. Zachary has provided all that through his work, and I will not send away a good man because people want to gossip." She walked away before Mrs. Patterson could respond, her head high despite the anger shaking through her. James and Sarah were waiting outside with Zachary, who had begun attending services with them, sitting in the back pew and enduring the stares and whispers with patient dignity. "Are you all right?" he asked quietly as they walked back to where he had left his horse. "I am tired of small-minded people," she said, "but I am fine." That afternoon, Zachary taught James to fish at the creek that ran along the eastern edge of the property. Hannah and Sarah came along, and they spent hours in the dappled shade, watching the water flow and listening to Zachary's patient instructions. He showed James how to read the water, where fish liked to hide, how to feel the tug on the line that meant interest versus the strike that meant commitment. They caught 3 decent-sized trout, and that evening Hannah fried them up for dinner, the 4 of them eating together as the sun set. It felt like family. That was the thought that kept circling through Hannah's mind. This felt like being part of a family again, like having someone to share the load and the joy of living. James adored Zachary, followed him around, and absorbed everything he said with the fervent devotion of a boy desperate for a father figure. Sarah, shyer, had begun bringing Zachary flowers and sitting near him while he worked, her small presence a sign of trust given. One evening, after a particularly long day, Zachary lingered on the porch after putting James through a lesson in knot tying. The children were finally asleep, and Hannah had brought out coffee to share in the cool night air. "I have been thinking," Zachary said, staring out at the star-filled sky. "About the future, about what I want and what is possible." "What do you want?" Hannah asked softly. "I want to stay here, not just visit, but stay, make this my home, help you build this ranch into something that can support all of us. Marry you if you will have me and be a father to James and Sarah." He turned to look at her, his eyes serious. "I know it is fast. I know people will talk even more than they already are. But I am 30 years old, Hannah, and I have spent half my life alone. I do not want to be alone anymore. I want to be with you." Her breath caught. Marriage. It was enormous, terrifying, and yet it made perfect sense. They worked well together, cared for each other, and the practical benefits were undeniable. Together they could make the ranch work. Together they could give her children the stable home they deserved. And beyond the practical considerations, there was the way her heart lifted when she saw him, the way his smile made her feel warm all the way through. "What about the talk?" she managed. "People already disapprove. If we marry, then they will disapprove more loudly for a while, and then they will find something else to gossip about. People always do." He set down his coffee cup and took her hands in both of his. "I will not pretend it will be easy." There will be people who refuse to do business with us, people who say cruel things to our children. But there will also be people who judge us by our character and our actions, not by prejudice. Mrs. Henderson is one. There will be others. You said our children, Hannah whispered. You meant that. I meant it. If you will let me, I will raise James and Sarah as my own, love them as my own. They are good children, Hannah, and I already care for them. That would only grow. She felt tears prick her eyes. Samuel would have liked you. He would have trusted you with them. Then will you trust me with them? Will you trust me with your future? Yes. The word came out clear and certain. Yes, I will marry you. He pulled her to him, wrapping his arms around her, and she leaned into his strength, feeling the solid reality of him. They stood like that for a long moment, holding each other under the stars, the future spreading before them full of possibility and hope. They married 3 weeks later in a simple ceremony performed by the circuit preacher. Mrs. Henderson stood as witness, and the storekeeper, Mr. Patterson, who had more kindness than his wife, agreed to be the other. James and Sarah attended in their best clothes, James solemn with the importance of the occasion, Sarah clutching a bouquet of wildflowers Hannah had helped her pick that morning. Hannah wore her best dress, a gray silk that had been her Sunday best before Samuel's death, freshened with new ribbon and careful pressing. Zachary wore new clothes purchased specially for the occasion, dark trousers, a white shirt, a vest, and a string tie. He had gotten his hair cut and his boots polished, and when he saw Hannah walking toward him, his expression held such open love and joy that her own eyes filled with tears. The ceremony was brief, the words ancient and binding. When the preacher pronounced them married, Zachary kissed her gently, a promise of tenderness and respect, and Hannah felt her old life officially end and her new one begin. The wedding dinner was held at Mrs. Henderson's house, just the small wedding party and a few friends who had defied social pressure to attend. It was not grand, but it was warm and genuine, full of laughter and good wishes. Mr. Patterson gave a short toast about new beginnings and second chances. Mrs. Henderson presented them with a wedding quilt she had pieced herself, the pattern called double wedding ring, stitched with wishes for harmony and prosperity. As the evening wound down and they prepared to return home to their home now, together Hannah felt a bone-deep contentment she had not experienced in months. Zachary lifted a sleeping Sarah into his arms and took James by the hand, and they walked through the cooling evening back to the ranch, a family complete. That night, after the children were settled, Hannah and Zachary finally had time alone. There was awkwardness in it, the strangeness of sharing space with someone new in this intimate way, but there was also tenderness. Zachary was patient and careful, attuned to her needs and boundaries, and when they came together as husband and wife, it was with mutual respect and growing affection that would, with time, deepen into abiding love. The days that followed established new rhythms. Zachary moved his few possessions into the cabin, and they rearranged the space to accommodate everyone. He rose early to tend the livestock and work on ranch improvements, while Hannah managed the household and her sewing business. They worked together in the garden, expanding it to grow more vegetables for their larger family. In the evenings, after the children were in bed, they would sit together and talk about their days, about plans for the future, about dreams they wanted to build toward. The talk in town did not stop, but it did fade somewhat as people found new scandals to occupy them. Some customers stopped bringing Hannah sewing work, but others continued, and new ones appeared, often women who appreciated her willingness to stand against prejudice, or who simply recognized quality work when they saw it. The ranch slowly became more profitable under Zachary's management. He had a gift for reading animals and land, for knowing what would work and what would not. He bought a few head of cattle with money saved from his cowboy days, and he had plans to gradually build the herd. James thrived under Zachary's attention, growing more confident and capable. Zachary taught him to ride properly, to shoot, to track, to read the weather and the land. But he also taught him gentler things to whittle, to appreciate silence, to treat all creatures with respect. Sarah followed her brother's lead, losing her shyness as the security of a stable home sank in. She began to laugh more, to play with the abandon of a child who feels safe. 6 months into their marriage, on a cold December evening, Hannah realized she was pregnant. The knowledge came as a surprise despite the inevitability of it. She had not thought much about more children, had been too focused on surviving and adjusting to her new life. But now, sitting by the fire while Zachary read aloud to the children from a book of stories, she placed a hand over her still flat belly and felt a surge of joy and fear. She waited until they were alone to tell him. "Zachary, I need to tell you something." He looked up from the harness he was mending, concern crossing his face at her serious tone. "What is it? Are you all right?" "I am fine. Better than fine. I am pregnant." For a moment he simply stared at her, processing the information. Then a slow smile spread across his face, transforming it. "Truly, truly. The baby should come sometime in the summer." He crossed to her in 2 long strides and pulled her into his arms, holding her carefully as if she might break. "A baby, our baby." His voice was thick with emotion. "I never thought I would have this. A wife, children, a home. It seemed like something for other people, not for someone like me. You have it now, we have it now. All of it." He kissed her then, deeply, and she felt the last vestiges of her reserve melt away. She loved this man. Somewhere between his first offer of help and now, affection had grown into something stronger, something that filled all the empty spaces grief had left behind. She loved his steadiness, his kindness, his strength and his gentleness. She loved the way he treated her children and the way he looked at her like she was precious. She loved him, wholly and without reservation. "I love you," she said against his lips. "I need you to know that. I love you, Zachary." "I love you too," he replied, pulling back just enough to look into her eyes. "I have loved you since the day you stood up for me against Benson's men, maybe even before that. You are the bravest, strongest woman I have ever known, and I will spend the rest of my life trying to deserve you." "You already deserve me. You deserve all the happiness in the world." They stood together in the lamplight, holding each other, the cabin warm around them and the future bright with promise. The winter passed slowly, the pregnancy progressing without complication. Hannah continued her sewing work, until her belly grew too large to comfortably sit at her work table for long periods. Zachary took on more of the household tasks, cooking and cleaning without complaint, never making her feel less capable or useful. He talked to the baby through her belly in both English and Comanche, telling stories and singing songs his mother had sung to him. James was excited about the coming baby, asking constant questions about when it would arrive and whether it would be a brother or sister. Sarah was more uncertain, worried about being displaced, but Zachary made sure to give her extra attention, assuring her that new babies meant more love, not less. In March, unseasonably warm and bright, Hannah went into labor. Mrs. Henderson came to attend the birth, bringing her experience and calm competence. It was a long labor, lasting through the night and into the next afternoon, but finally, as the sun began its descent, Hannah delivered a healthy baby boy. Zachary was there for the birth, holding her hand and wiping her face, offering comfort and encouragement. When the baby was placed in his arms, cleaned and wrapped in a soft blanket Mrs. Henderson had brought, He looked down at his son with such wonder and love that Hannah felt her heart might burst from the beauty of it. "What should we name him?" Zachary asked, sitting beside her bed, still holding the baby with careful reverence. "I was thinking about your mother." "What was her name?" taught I. "It means coming out in Comanche like sunrise." "Then let us call him Thomas, which means twin, because he is born between two worlds like you were. And we can call him Tom for short, which is close to Taut-Eye. What do you think?" "I think it is perfect," Zachary said softly. "Thomas Abbott, welcome to the world, son." James and Sarah were allowed in to meet their new brother, both wide-eyed with amazement at the tiny person. James touched the baby's hand with one careful finger, and little Tom's fingers closed reflexively around it. "He is strong," James said with satisfaction. "He will be a good brother." "You will teach him everything you know," Hannah said, smoothing James's hair. "You and Sarah both. You will help him learn and grow." Over the following weeks, the household adjusted to the new addition. Tom was a good baby, crying only when hungry or wet, sleeping for increasingly long stretches. Zachary was a devoted father, rising in the night to bring the baby to Hannah for feeding, changing diapers without complaint, walking the floor with Tom when he was fussy. Hannah had never seen Samuel with a baby. James had been 2 when they married. Sarah just born, but she could not imagine him being this involved, this naturally paternal. As spring arrived and then summer, the ranch continued to prosper. Zachary's cattle were breeding well, and he had plans to drive a small herd to market in the fall. The garden was thriving, and Hannah had returned to her sewing work, fitting it around Tom's care. They hired a young woman from town, a Mexican girl named Rosa, whose family had been driven off their land by Anglo settlers, to help with the housework and child minding. Rosa and Hannah became fast friends, both women understanding what it meant to be judged for circumstances beyond their control. In August, nearly a year after Hannah and Zachary married, the Double B Ranch, named for both their surnames, Brighton and Abbott, held its first successful cattle drive. Zachary and 2 hired hands drove 30 head to the railhead 2 towns over, and the money they earned was enough to buy more breeding stock and make improvements to the property. They were not wealthy, but they were comfortable, and the future looked brighter than Hannah had dared hope. That autumn, as the weather cooled and the leaves on the cottonwoods turned gold, Zachary came home one afternoon with news. "Benson died," he said without preamble. "Heart gave out. The ranch is going up for sale." Hannah looked up from the shirt she was mending. "What does that mean for us?" "It means the biggest source of trouble in this county is gone. His sons are city men, no interest in ranching. They will sell to the highest bidder and go back east." He sat down beside her, taking her hand. "It means we might finally have real peace. No more harassment, no more men riding by making threats they are too cowardly to carry out." "I will not celebrate a man's death," Hannah said, "but I will not mourn it either. He caused a lot of pain to a lot of people, including my mother's people. The Comanche who lived on the land his ranch now sits on. He drove them off with violence and theft." Zachary's expression was grim. "There is justice in the fact that his sons do not want what he stole." They sat quietly for a moment, and then James burst in with Sarah and Tom toddling behind, and the moment of reflection passed into the beautiful chaos of family life. 2 years later, Hannah found herself pregnant again, this time with a daughter they would name Hope. The birth was easier than Tom's had been, and baby Hope was a joy, bright-eyed and quick to smile. Tom, now a sturdy 3-year-old, was fascinated by his baby sister, always wanting to help care for her. James was 10, tall and capable, already helping Zachary with the harder ranch work. Sarah was 8, dreamy and artistic, constantly drawing pictures of the family and the ranch, her artwork covering the cabin walls. The cabin had been expanded, new rooms added to accommodate the growing family. Zachary had built most of it himself, with help from neighbors who had come to respect the hard work and integrity the Abbotts demonstrated daily. The Double B was now one of the most successful small ranches in the region, known for quality cattle and fair dealing. Hannah's reputation as a seamstress had spread beyond Paradise, and she received mail orders from as far as Tucson. They were happy. It was a simple fact, but one that still sometimes took Hannah by surprise. After the devastation of losing Samuel, after the desperate scramble to survive alone, she had not expected to find this kind of contentment. But here it was. A husband who loved her, children who were healthy and thriving, work that was fulfilling, a home that was truly home. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Zachary took her on a picnic to the creek where he had taught James to fish all those years ago. Rosa watched the children, shooing them away with a smile and instructions to take their time. They rode out in the early evening, the air still warm but no longer scorching, the light golden and long. At the creek, Zachary spread a blanket and unpacked the food Hannah had prepared. They ate and talked about everything and nothing, enjoying the rare moment of being alone together. After they finished eating, Zachary pulled out a small package wrapped in cloth. "I made this for you," he said, handing it to her. Inside was a pendant carved from a single piece of turquoise, shaped like a bird in flight, suspended on a fine silver chain. The workmanship was exquisite, the details precise. "Zachary, it is beautiful. When did you make this?" "I have been working on it for months, a little bit at a time whenever I had a spare moment." He took it from her and fastened it around her neck. "The bird is for freedom and new beginnings. My mother used to say that we should be like birds, willing to fly to new places, to build new nests, to start over when we need to. You gave me that. You gave me a place to land and build something permanent." Hannah touched the pendant, feeling the smoothness of the stone, the care that had gone into its creation. "You gave me the same thing. When I asked for pins and needles that day, I was asking for the bare minimum I needed to survive. But you gave me so much more. You stitched together a tomorrow I did not think I could have. You mended the broken pieces of my life." He pulled her close, and she rested her head on his shoulder, listening to the creek burble and the evening insects begin their songs. They had both come to this place broken in different ways, two people scarred by loss and hardship. But together they had built something whole, something strong enough to weather whatever storms might come. "You ever regret it?" Zachary asked quietly. "Marrying me, I mean." "Taking on all the trouble that came with it? Never. Not for a single moment." She lifted her head to look at him. "Do you? No. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Hannah Abbott. You and our children, this life we have built. I would not change any of it." They kissed as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and purple, and when they finally rode home, it was under stars that seemed brighter and more numerous than ever before, a canopy of light to guide them forward into all the tomorrows still to come. The years continued to unfold, each one bringing its own joys and challenges. There were hard times, of course, droughts that tested their resources, illness that struck the children but was overcome, the ongoing struggle against prejudice that never fully disappeared. But there were far more good times than bad. Tom grew into a quiet, thoughtful boy who loved animals and wanted to be a veterinarian when he grew up. Hope was fierce and clever, always asking questions and never accepting easy answers. James eventually married a woman from town and built his own home on the far corner of the ranch property, staying close to family. Sarah went to school in Tucson and became a teacher, but she returned to Paradise every summer, her heart never quite leaving home. Hannah and Zachary grew older together, their love deepening with each passing year. The passion of new love matured into something richer, more complex, woven through with shared experiences and mutual respect. They knew each other's rhythms and moods, could communicate with a glance across a crowded room, could comfort each other with simple presence in times of grief or worry. When Tom turned 18 and announced his intention to study veterinary medicine in California, Hannah felt the bittersweet ache of watching children grow up and leave. But she was proud too, so proud of the thoughtful young man he had become, of his determination to use his gifts to help others. "We did good work," Zachary said that night, lying beside her in the darkness. They were both in their late 40s now, their hair showing silver, their bodies marked by years of hard work, but they were healthy and strong, blessed with vitality and purpose. "We did," Hannah agreed. "All our children are good people, making their way in the world. That is more than many parents can say. More than I ever dreamed I would have. A family, children who call me father, grandchildren soon enough if I am reading the signs right with James and Mary." Hannah laughed softly. "You probably are. Mary has been looking especially happy lately. I would not be surprised if they announce something soon." They fell silent, comfortable in the darkness. Outside, the ranch was quiet, the animals settled for the night. In the room next to theirs, Hope was asleep, dreaming the vivid dreams of the young. The house they had built together sheltered them all, solid and warm against the desert night. "You remember that day in the general store?" Hannah asked. "When we first met, of course. You needed pins and needles, and you offered to help. I thought it was charity. I almost turned you down because I was too proud. I am glad you did not. I am glad you let me in. So am I. Every day I am grateful you walked into that store at just the right moment. It felt like fate." Maybe it was. Or maybe we just recognized something in each other. Two people who needed help and were brave enough to accept it. She turned to face him, reaching out to touch his face in the darkness. "I love you, Zachary Abbott. After all these years, after everything we have been through, I love you more now than I did on our wedding day. I love you too, Hannah. You are my heart, my home. Everything good in my life traces back to you." They made love then, with the gentle familiarity of long partnership, and afterward they slept wrapped in each other's arms, dreaming of the past they had overcome and the future still unfolding. The years rolled on. James and Mary had 3 children, 2 boys and a girl, who spent long summer days at the Double B, learning ranching from their grandfather and sewing from their grandmother. Sarah married a fellow teacher and had twin daughters who inherited their mother's artistic talents. Tom finished his studies and opened a veterinary practice in Phoenix, but visited home often, always making time for his family despite the demands of his profession. Hope, fiercest and most independent of all, went into business, opening a dry goods store in Paradise that quickly became the most successful in town. Her sharp mind and sharper tongue keeping would-be cheaters honest. As Hannah and Zachary entered their 60s, the ranch passed increasingly into James's capable hands, though Zachary still rode out most mornings to check on things, unable to fully let go of the land he had helped build into prosperity. Hannah still sewed, though her eyes were not what they once were, and she focused now on special projects: wedding dresses for granddaughters, christening gowns for great-grandchildren who began arriving with regularity. They sat together one evening on the porch of the house, watching the sun set over the land that had been their life's work. Zachary's hair was now pure white, and Hannah's hands were gnarled with arthritis, but they were still here, still together, still finding joy in simple things. "Do you remember when we first sat on this porch?" Hannah asked. "After that storm, when you told me you wanted to court me, I remember. I was terrified you would say no. I was terrified you would say yes and then disappear, that I would let myself hope and it would be taken away again. But I did not disappear. No, you did not. You stayed. You kept every promise you ever made to me." He reached over and took her hand, his grip still strong despite the years. "It was easy. You were worth staying for." They sat in comfortable silence as the stars began to emerge one by one in the darkening sky. Somewhere in the house behind them, there were sounds of family grandchildren laughing, Hope arguing good-naturedly with her mother about something inconsequential, James discussing cattle prices with one of his sons. The sound of life continuing, of the legacy they had built together. "I am content," Hannah said softly. "Whatever comes next, I am content with the life we have lived." "So am I," Zachary replied. "I have loved and been loved. I have seen my children grow and prosper. I have worked land that I helped make fruitful. That is more than most men get." "We still have time, though. Years yet, I hope." "Years," he agreed. "Many more years to enjoy all this." And they did have years, as it turned out. Years of watching their family grow and thrive. Years of quiet contentment in each other's company. Years of being the patriarch and matriarch of a clan that spread throughout the territory. The Double B Ranch became legendary in the area, not for its size or wealth, but for its integrity, for being a place where all people were treated fairly regardless of race or background, for being a home that had been built on love and sustained by it. When Zachary finally died, at the age of 78, it was peacefully in his sleep, with Hannah beside him as she had been for more than 40 years. The funeral drew people from across the territory, all coming to pay respects to a man who had lived with dignity and honor, who had overcome prejudice through the simple expedient of being undeniably good. Hannah mourned him deeply, but without the desperate, panicked grief she had felt at Samuel's death. This grief was different, profound but not disabling, full of sorrow but also gratitude for the years they had shared. She wore his turquoise pendant every day for the rest of her life, touching it when she needed to feel close to him. She lived another 8 years, surrounded by family, still sharp-minded and engaged with the world despite her physical frailty. She sewed until her hands could no longer manage a needle, then told stories instead, passing down the history of the ranch and the family to any who would listen. On a spring morning much like the one when she had first walked into the general store asking for pins and needles, Hannah died quietly in her sleep, a peaceful passing that her children and grandchildren chose to see as a mercy. She was buried beside Zachary on a hill overlooking the ranch, under a cottonwood tree that gave cooling shade. The tombstones were simple but well made, carved from the same red stone that ran through the land they had loved. Hannah Brighton Abbott, the stone read. Beloved wife, mother, grandmother. 1854–1930. She mended more than fabric. Zachary Daniel Abbott, beloved husband, father, grandfather. 1848–1926. He built a home and filled it with love. In the years after their deaths, the family would gather there sometimes, especially on anniversaries and holidays, to remember the two people who had created this legacy of love and resilience. They would tell the story of how Hannah had needed pins and needles, and how a cowboy had offered to help, and how that simple transaction had stitched together a tomorrow neither had dared dream possible. The story became part of the family mythology, told and retold, a reminder that love can bloom in the harshest conditions, that family can be built as well as born, that courage and kindness can overcome prejudice and loss. The Double B Ranch continued to thrive under James's stewardship, and then his children's, adapting to the changing times but never losing sight of the values Hannah and Zachary had instilled. The house was preserved, becoming a cherished gathering place for the sprawling Abbott clan. The general store where they had first met was eventually torn down, but Hope's dry goods store remained, passing to her daughters and then their daughters, a continuing presence in Paradise.